We start our study in Revelation chapter 8. We have just finished Revelation 4, 5, 6, and 7. In my judgment, Revelation chapter 6 will give various problems that will come upon the church by those who are outside who are trying to destroy her. In Revelation chapter 6, you have the fifth seal being opened, and that would be the saints under the altar who have been slain for the testimony of the word of God, and they are crying, "How long, O Lord?" And what you have in the book of Revelation in reality is the coming of judgment, condemnation upon the nation of Israel, who is reaping, who is causing, who is sowing the problems against the church of our Lord, as you read in the first four seals. And what John does in the last part, the sixth seal of chapter 6, is he shows that those who are trying to hurt the church are going to reap the consequences of their actions. So he concludes by asking, well, who shall stand? Well, in chapter 7, you have the answer to that. And the answer to that would be, starting with the giving of the sealing of the 144,000. We emphasize the 144,000 were of the earth. We went over a number of details that would show that. But then we made sure that we understood that it wasn't over the whole earth, but it was a limited area, because the four winds are held back at the river Euphrates. The river Euphrates is the eastern boundary of the deeded land that God had promised unto Abraham. Well, if the four winds are at the river Euphrates, they're not going to back up. They're coming on into the promised land, Judea, to do some destructiveness and avenge the saints of God. So the 144,000, the 12 out of each tribe that's named, there's two tribes not named. The two tribes that are not named would be Ephraim and Dan. Ephraim is the leadership back in the Old Testament concerning idolatry, who would set up the idols, Rehoboam, in Bethel and in Dan, Dan being the northern border. And they had already started in idolatry, and it had gone throughout the whole small tribe. So those two lost the faithfulness that they should have manifested. Now, what you have after seeing that it is limited to Israel, and then he says that there's 144,000, therefore those in Judea would be the church of the Lord before the destruction is let loose at the Euphrates River. There has to be some work done. There has to be some preaching of the gospel in order to bring about the 144,000. When you get to Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, you have the multitude in heaven out of all tribes. See the contrast? Revelation 7:1, you have the 144,000 out of the tribes of Israel. Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, you have them out of all tribes, all over the world. It's a multitude instead of just 144,000. It is innumerable in contrast to the numberable. And so what you have is a contrast in what is happening for those who are now come out of the Great Tribulation, a contrast of the Great Tribulation that they had gone through, Revelation chapter 6, with the blessings that they are now enjoying in Revelation chapter 7. They now have a shepherd over them instead of a slayer. They have an assistant instead of an assailant against them. This brings us to Revelation chapter 8, 9, 10, 11. Those four go together. The reason you know they go together is because the trumpets are sounded, and the last trumpet is not sounded, the third woe, until chapter 11, verse 14. This is the second woe. The third is yet to come. That's what he says in Revelation 11, 14. So you know that in the mind of John is a section as to what's going to happen. Now, here we start our new study with this concept. That was a quick review. And the concept is this: what John says in imagery, in symbolic language, Jesus already said, but he used straight language. He used language to say Jerusalem, Judea, the Israelites are going to fall. They're no longer going to be a nation. Well, John says the same thing in Revelation chapter 8, 9, 10, 11, those verses. Now in chapter 12, we start anew with some new concepts, still dwelling on the idea that John is talking about the fall of Jerusalem, the fall of Judea, the fall of the nation of Israel. But he addresses it from a different angle, which we shall see when we get to chapter 7. As you look at 8 through 11, you have this imagery of what Jesus said in clear language, of which Moses predicted. Deuteronomy chapter 28. Now, Deuteronomy chapter 28, and that's the middle verse, middle chapter of what is happening, says the same thing as Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, says the same thing as Revelation chapter 8 and following. They just use different language to say it. Now, I'm coming at it from the angle that Revelation is a discussion of the fall of the enemy of the people of God, and that is the fall of Israel, because they are the enemy of God. And they are using their cohorts, Rome and other governments, in order to help them destroy the saints of God in the first century. That is a quick concept as to what I would present as to what's going on in chapter 6 through chapter 11, especially 8 through 11. Looking at chapter 8, verse 1. When he opened the seventh seal, remember there were 7 introduced to us in Revelation chapter 6. When he opened the 7th seal, there followed a silence in heaven about the space of half an hour. Now, I don't want any of you to bring up the joke that says there's no women in heaven for 30 minutes. That's just not nice to do that. Don't do that. And so what you have is the trumpets blasting out. Verse 2, I saw the 7 angels that stand before God. There were given unto them 7 trumpets. Right here, we will understand the 7 trumpets if we allow God to tell us what they are. Now, we can go out and we can talk about trumpets for 6 years, 20 years, a lifetime. But if we allow God to give us the purpose of the trumpets, then we're going to understand better as to what's going on in Revelation chapter 8. Notice Numbers chapter 10 that I gave you the last time we studied. Numbers chapter 10, you have the children of Israel coming out of Egyptian bondage. They are formulating a nation. They have the priest. Moses is leading them. They are encamped in the way that God would give. Now, here's what he says in Numbers chapter 10. Jehovah spake unto Moses, and he said this, make 2 trumpets of silver. Thou shalt use them, number 1, for the calling of the congregation, the gathering of Israel. Number 2, for the journeying of the camps. Now, from verse 3 through verse 8, he goes into what he means by the journeying of the camps. He returns back, verse 9, he gives a third purpose for the trumpets. And when ye go to war in your land against the adversary that oppresseth you, then ye shall sound an alarm with the trumpets. Underline that, put a star by that, highlight that, memorize that, know that backwards and forwards, because that tells you what's going on in Revelation chapter 8. The trumpets are sounding an alarm to Israel. We conclude in verse 10 our thought, and that is there's a fourth reason for the trumpets. Also, on the day of your gladness and on the day of your set feast, you blow the trumpet. Now, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go through three different prophets of God, and I'm going to show you how the trumpets were used as an alarm. First of all, there would be Amos chapter 3, verse 6. In Amos 3, verse 6, shall the trumpet be blown in a city and the people not be afraid? Shall evil befall a city and Jehovah hath not done it? The answer is no. When the people hear the trumpet blow, it will alarm them. They will be afraid. Fear will befall them because they know ill fortune is coming. Problems are being stirred. We now take notice of Ezekiel chapter 33. Ezekiel 33. Ezekiel 33, verse 3, if when he seeth the sword come upon the land, that is, the watchman sees it, he blow the trumpet and warn the people. What's the purpose of the trumpet? To warn the people. Then whosoever heareth the sound of the trumpet taketh not warning, if the sword come and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. He heard and the sound of the trumpet and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him. Whereas if he had taken warning, he would have delivered his soul. But if the watchman see the sword come and blow not the trumpet, the people be not warned, the sword come and taketh any person from among them, he taketh it away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. Now here's what you just heard. You know what you heard. The watchman sees the problem, the devastation that's coming. He blows the trumpet, he warns, he alerts the people. When you come to the New Testament, and you're reading Revelation chapter 8 and 9, and you hear of the trumpets sounding, know this. The trumpet sounded with Jesus, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21. The trumpet sounded with Stephen, Acts chapter 6, Acts chapter 7, Acts chapter 8. We know the trumpet sounded with Paul, with Peter, and the other apostles as they went through the land, and they warned the people that judgment was coming upon Israel because of their transgressions against God. The trumpet was sounding out. Well, you have the trumpet sounded out by Jesus in straight, clear language, prophetic language. Then you have John sounding it out in the imagery that he uses. And if you were a Jew and you knew anything about Deuteronomy, if you knew anything about Amos, if you knew anything about Ezekiel, you knew that trumpet was blasting for you as a disobedient Jew or an obedient Jew that was going to do what Jesus said do, get out of the city. We now take attention and call your attention to Joel chapter 2, verse 1. We are looking at how the trumpet was used among the prophets in relationship to Numbers chapter 10, especially verse 9. Sound the alarm, sound the warning. Joel 2:1, blow ye the trumpet in Zion. Sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble. You will see that word tremble used by Jesus dozens of times, figure of speech, about dozens. For the day of Jehovah cometh, for it is nigh at hand. That's exactly what Jesus is saying. Upon this generation shall not pass till all of these signs shall be fulfilled. That's what he told them. The trumpet is sounding. Israel needs to hear. John is going to tell you the same thing, but he's going to use figures of speech in order to say it. Here you have in Revelation chapter 8, notice very quickly with me, and then we're going to start over. Revelation 8, verse 6. The seven angels had seven trumpets prepared to sound. The first sounded, and the third part of the trees were burned up, and so forth. Verse 8. The second sounded, a great mountain burning. Verse 10. The third angel sounded, the trumpet. Wormwood was his name. Chapter 8, verse 12. The fourth angel sounded, and again, the sun, moon, and stars. Then you have a little bit of a switch, a slight switch, because there's a difference. There's a distinction to be made in the next sounding warning that comes. You just heard John give you, and we're going to go over it, imagery of the coming trouble. The coming trouble is at the river Euphrates. It's the four winds. They're being held back. The time is not yet. There has to be warning given unto those of Judea. And so, in chapter 8, verse 13, we see a distinction, a line. I heard an angel flying in mid-heaven saying with a great voice, woe, misery, 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 woe, 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 for them that dwell on the earth, by reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the three angels, who are yet to sound. There are things coming that are even worse. So when you see the three woes, Revelation 9:1, Revelation 9:13, Revelation chapter 11, verse 14, Revelation 11:14, the second woe is past, and the third woe is to come. Those woes speak of the terrible destruction, directly destruction upon the temple and upon Jerusalem. Now, here's what I've done in my own mind. And what you can do is you can give me instructions after I get through doing it my way. I'm open. You have Deuteronomy and Moses predicting the fall of Jerusalem and the total destruction of Jerusalem. You have Jesus, which would be some 1,500 years after Moses, predicting the fall of Jerusalem and the total destruction. And about 30 or 40 years later, you have John, the apostle, giving warning, a prediction of the fall of Jerusalem and her total destruction. But he gives it in imagery. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn to, let's look at Deuteronomy first. I want this before you. Then when you study Revelation 8, 9, and the words of Jesus in Matthew 24, they will, I think, be clearer as to what the imagery is showing and what Jesus' prediction is all about. So we are in what Moses had to say as he was coming up to the land of promise and they were fixing to go in. He would not make it in, but he's now giving them Deuteronomy, the second speaking of the law. Deuteronomy, duo. Notice with me in Deuteronomy 27, this is where they gather together, verse 11. Now, I'm not giving you the whole lesson. I'm not giving you the whole total context. We're not reading all of it. We're looking at parts of it so that you can get the idea of what I'm saying when I say that Moses warned Israel what was going to happen 1,500 years before it came to pass. Deuteronomy 27, verse 11, and Moses charged the people in that day, these shall stand upon Mount Gerizim to bless the people, verse 13, and these shall stand upon Mount Ebal to curse. So if you remember where Jericho is, the children of Israel are fixing to go into the promised land. And when they go into the promised land and they have the time and the capability after destroying the enemy within the land, they stand on Mount Ebal and they stand on Gerizim. The people are in between. And the Levites are reading to them the blessings and the cursings. Here they are, partially. Chapter 28, 1 and 2. It shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth. And all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of thy God. And then he goes through what some of those are. Look at chapter 28, verse 15. But, and that's how he starts that verse. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe all his commandments and his statutes which I command thee this day, that all these curses shall come upon thee. You now know why it's called blessings and cursings. They're going to announce the blessings when they get into the land. Then they're going to go to Mount Ebal, which is right across the street. That's a figure of speech. And they will give all the curses, if they do not obey. Well, Israel didn't obey. So let's go through the curses instead of the blessings. Here's some of the details. Here's some of the specifics. Deuteronomy 28, verse 53. And thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own body, the flesh of thy sons and of thy daughters, whom Jehovah thy God hath given thee, in the siege and in the straitness, hardships, wherewith thine enemies shall distress thee. Josephus, the historian of the first century, who was right outside the gate of Jerusalem when Rome marched against it and took it down, the soldiers would go into the city and they found a delicate woman who had a newborn infant. She became so hungry that she took the life of her infant, roasted it, ate half of it, and offered unto the Roman soldiers the other half. They were sickened by what had occurred. It's amazing how Moses was so detailed in what would occur. Chapter 32, verse 24. You'll have to pardon me in Deuteronomy why I'm bouncing around, but I'm getting the subject instead of following the verses as they come along. Deuteronomy 32, verse 24, they shall be wasted with hunger and devoured with burning heat and bitter destruction. I will send the teeth of beast upon them with the poison of crawling things of the dust. Deuteronomy 28, 21. Verse 21, Jehovah will make the pestilence. By the way, you might mark down what each one of these are: famine, hunger, pestilence, and more. Watch this verse. I will make the pestilence cleave unto thee until he hath consumed thee from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. Jehovah will smite thee with consumption, with fever, with inflammation, with fiery heat, with the sword, with blasting, with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish. That's a dire prediction. Moses is using active language to say it, but it just means that God is going to allow the Roman army to do these things against the children of Israel because they hearken not unto the voice of the Lord God. And they went after the idols. And when you go after the idols, you do not know who God is, and you do not know who you are. Deuteronomy 28, 49 through 50. Jehovah will bring a nation against thee from afar, from the end of the earth, as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand, a nation of fierce countenance. Thou shalt not regard the person of the old, nor the favor to the young. So an invasion of a foreign army, and God will not protect them. We again reiterate this point. God is not saying that he personally is going to swoop down upon them and do these things. He is saying you will not be protected from these things, and men will want to do it, and I'm going to allow it because you have not hearkened, and you need no longer to be the nation, the chosen nation. Israel, since the first century, is not the chosen nation of God. It does not exist. Deuteronomy 28:52. And he shall beseech thee in all thy gates until thy high and fortified walls come down. Jesus said in Matthew 24, not one stone left upon another. You don't get any clearer than that. Wherein thou trustest, there throughout all thy land, he shall beseech thee in all thy gates throughout all thy land, which Jehovah thy God hath given thee. So the four winds are being held at the Euphrates. They will be let loose, and when they come down, and they will march from the north to the south, they will beseech, harm, hurt, devastate Judea, and the people of God. Here's the takeaway that probably needs to be made sure that we understand. With apostasy of Israel is national death. That's what Moses is saying. The if ye forsake Jehovah, then you'll be uprooted clause sets the template. Moses is telling Israel that covenant disloyalty will bring not only trouble, but total collapse. And that's exactly what occurred with Israel. Is it Israel's cruelty? No. It's Israel. Is it God's cruelty? No. It's the Roman government's cruelty that God has allowed for men to do what men will do. And he's no longer protecting his promised people. Jesus, Matthew 24, reiterates that same curse, pointing to its fulfillment in Jerusalem's fall. Deuteronomy 24, Matthew 24, 6 and 7. By the way, I discussed it with myself and I won the argument as to whether to introduce Matthew 24 and then go through a study of Matthew 24 or not. Now, if somebody says, let's go through a study of Matthew 24, we'll go through a detailed study of the signs and the historical fulfillment of those signs that occurred in the first century, just like Jesus predicted before this generation. However, if not, then what I'm going to do is just allow what I'm about to say as to be the reference to what Jesus had to say in Matthew 24. So Matthew 24, 6, Jesus reiterates the same curse. You shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for these things must needs come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines, earthquakes in divers places. That's what Moses said. Verse 15. When therefore you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, parenthesis, let him that readeth understand. End of parenthesis. And up, parenthesis. What Jesus just said was, look at what Daniel's talking about, and you'll get the point. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to not only read what he said in Matthew to the Jews for them to understand, but we're going to read the others and get the understanding without going through the book of Daniel. In Matthew 24:15, I see 24:16, we just read. Look at Luke 21:20. My apologies. We did not finish 24:15, 16. They're important. Here's what he said to the Jews. When therefore you see the abomination of desolation, which is spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, let him that readeth understand. Then let them that are in Judea flee unto the mountains. We know from the historian Josephus and others, it was known that whenever the army was marching down from the north to encompass Jerusalem, Jews fled from Jerusalem left and right, and they went to the mountains to escape the problem. Those were believers. Those were children of God. They had been warned. The trumpet had blasted, and they knew what was coming. The unbeliever, the ungodly, they stayed in Jerusalem. We're now turning to Luke 21. Luke was not written to Jews. Jews could read it. That was no problem. But his main audience would be Gentiles. Here's the way he said it. When you see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that her desolation is at hand. Then let them that are in Judea flee unto the mountains. Verse 22, for these are the days of vengeance. So much in that short passage. We saw what Jesus said. Now here's what we might do. Those are the days of vengeance. We now go to Revelation chapter 6. We see the fifth seal. How long, O Lord, how long wilt thou wait to avenge us? Is asked. Israel was a very wicked people in the days of Jesus. They crucified Christ, the greatest man to ever live, which is worse than taking the life and assassinating Kirk. The rest of that verse says this, for these are days of vengeance, that all things which are written might be fulfilled. And there's a host of things that were written in the prophets. We saw some in Deuteronomy. Woe unto them that are with child and them that give suck in those days, for there shall be great distress upon the land and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword and shall be led captive unto all the nations, and Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles. Look at verse 28, please. And when these things begin to come to pass, then look up, lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. These are the people that are taking your life left and right. Why? Because you're godly and you're doing what God says do. They're destroying you or trying to wipe you off of the face of the earth. So he says, when you see the what do you call it in Matthew? The desolation, the abomination of desolation. What do you call it in Luke 21? The army encompassing Jerusalem and the desolation that was coming. When you see these things occurring, your redemption is with it. Destruction for those who are wicked and evil and horrible people who will not repent, in contrast to those who believe Jesus and will flee into the mountains, and they will have their redemption from what's going to happen in Jerusalem. I'll give you a taste, just a little bit of Revelation chapter 8. You may have some questions. I'll be glad to try to answer any that you've got. But in Revelation chapter 8, we will go through Revelation 8 in greater detail next week. But again, we call your attention. I guess I'll do this. Revelation 8, 6 through 12 would be the four blasts, the four trumpets sounded by the four angels. And what that's telling you is God is warning the people in Judea and in Jerusalem. Those trumpets are warnings. Well, what would be the warning? Deuteronomy 28. God said, if you hearken not, here is what's going to happen to you. Thus, when this happens to you, you are being warned. God is not going to simply destroy you without warning you. But he is going to warn you, and Moses told you the warning. And Revelation chapter 8 is the trumpet sounding, is the warning that God is giving to the people, to Judea and the Jews in the first century before 70 AD. Let me reiterate that point. God destroyed the world because every imagination of man was only evil continually. Genesis chapter 6. God warned the people through Noah. They didn't have to die. All they had to do was believe and get in the ark. They did not. They would not. Not that they could not, but they would not. In Genesis chapter 18 and 19, you had the fall of Sodom and Gomorrah. But they had warning. 4 left Sodom. 3 remained alive. 1 looked back to the evil that was there. They were warned. The prophets would warn the children of Israel repeatedly concerning the fall of the northern tribes. 2 Kings chapter 17. And the northern tribes, Israel, Ephraim, perished. They fulfilled what was going on before the southern tribes. God would warn the children of Israel, and they fell into the hands of the Babylonians in around 620 BC, 586, and there were 3 times that they came, the Babylonians. After the Babylonian captivity, the children of Israel kind of learned not to go into idolatry. So God warns and warns and warns. Not only that, the book of Jonah. Go into this great city, God told Jonah, and blast the trumpet to them. And they don't even know what the trumpet means. But they knew what the warning was. Yet 40 days and Jehovah will destroy Nineveh. And the people repented in sackcloth and ashes, and it lasted 100 years. God warns. Folks, people are warned today, but they make fun of God. They ridicule God. They don't like what God is doing. If you don't like what God is doing, it means you don't know God. You really don't know God. Yes, I do. He's mean, cruel, and all sorts of things. You don't know God. And you don't know sin. I do not say that arrogantly, but I say it confidently. God has given us the book so that we can know and know that we know that he will not wink at sin, but he will call all men into judgment. Revelation is calling his people into judgment, that he predicted, Deuteronomy 28, that he predicted, Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, that he predicted the writings in the New Testament and the preaching and the teaching of the apostles and prophets.